Cookie-cutter unrest in Japan shows the global COVID clampdown is no accident. By Graham Smith, May 31st, 2020. Copycat unrest in Japan. It's hard to believe that large anti-racism protests and shouting down of cops outside their stations have now come to typically mild and timid Tokyo, Japan. But that's what's happening. When I first saw footage of crowds marching through Shibuya, bearing neatly printed placards with slogans copied from America's highly publicized riots such as No Justice, No Peace, and Fuck the Police, I was immediately impressed. Something other than a grassroots protest was being put on. Indeed, I sensed I myself was being put on. Why was this footage picked up so quickly by the J media, which typically, in my personal estimation, ignores discriminatory treatment of foreigners, a not entirely uncommon occurrence? How was a police-escorted march through one of the busiest crossings in one of the biggest mega-metropolises in the world organized in mere days, in a land where organizing anything, let alone an anti-cop and anti-existing social order demonstration through main thoroughfares, usually entails months of meetings, piles of paperwork, and endless logistical planning? Well, what ostensibly set all this off was the detainment and heavy-handed treatment on May 22nd of a young Kurdish man in the city who, amidst endless protest in Japanese he'd done nothing wrong, was told by two blockhead Tokyo cops to shut up as they awkwardly tried to restrain him and appeared to half-heartedly choke him. I can't breathe is here now, I thought, incredulous. Of course, this abuse does organically happen, but the timing, the fact that the media ran the story, you gotta understand that Japanese media typically wants to make authority look good, and the heavily insular elements of the culture often aim to cover up anything that might shake the table, as it were. I could be wrong. It could be that the collective reaction in Japan is an indeed largely organic one, and that the influence from what is happening in the US and elsewhere is haphazardly spilled over in Japan's social periphery, slowly bleeding into the tunnel vision of the mass media. But I doubt it. COVID-19 Phase 2. There's an unshakable feeling of scriptedness to much of this, from looters in the States appearing to be planted agents provocateur, police standing down and weirdly allowing the destruction to proceed, big media crews being theatrically arrested and shot at with pepper rounds, bricks and cars strangely appearing at protest sites, to the military rolling in across the US in uniform fashion to light 'em up. As curfews are issued, bridges are raised, and travel cut off. In Europe, similar bizarre abuses at the hands of power in the name of safety are taking place as well, melding the Riot Narrative with the COVID narrative. It arguably could be construed by an unbiased observer of all this that the escalation of tensions surrounding these narratives is intentional. As an important aside, if you don't yet believe that intelligence agencies try to foment such unrest, please see here one of virtually innumerable examples in history. This all comes after an intense period of Phase 1 propagandization, forced isolation, and economic destruction at the hands of governments worldwide in the name of public health. Now, magically, social distancing and the supposedly deadly COVID-19 pandemic are viewed by the MSM as little more than an afterthought, if that, and the very same language used to sell that story is being used to sell this second phase. Contact tracing is now referring to weeding out potential criminal protesters. Stay home and stay safe are now no longer about COVID-19, but have become the calls by which politicians mandate obedience as martial law descends. Military drones are being put to the sky, the COVID narrative's economic destruction is being ramped up to new levels as the small businesses that were already destroyed economically by that lie are now physically burned, smashed up, and looted, and the President and Attorney General of the U.S. are calling for and promoting the classification of vast swaths of vaguely defined anarchic individuals as terrorists. In other words, COVID-19 was preparing the stage and the minds of the masses, dousing both with statist gasoline, and now we're witnessing a coordinated striking of the match to burn it all to the ground. But there's even more to the picture to explain why the conflagration is necessary. Show me the surveillance money. As a full-time reporter on cryptocurrencies for about a year last year, I spent a decent amount of time covering and looking into the development of CBDCs, or central bank digital currencies. The reason burning it all to the ground would work well if one were a social planner with access to the very organs of power that print and issue credit and enforce monetary policy and slavery is easy. Now, there's a great excuse to implement a highly surveillable form of money and eliminate hard cash, increasing control over the populace. Oh, we are so sorry for all the heartache and suffering that has befallen you. Please let us help by abandoning the outdated monetary systems that take debt and balance into account and instead issue new money with no limits. Via modern monetary theory, we know that debt is simply money we owe ourselves, and that we all must come together to abandon the idea of the greedy capitalist crushing his fellow man to succeed. With CBDCs, such as the digital yen and digital dollar, taxes will be unavoidable due to the ability we will all have to implement financial policy at code level. Selfish people will not be able to hide anything under the table. They will not be able to remove their money from banks to hide from negative interest rates. Rich capitalists will not be able to hide their wealth in offshore accounts. Those destroying our economies by fearfully saving will have no choice but to spend, as stuffing money under the mattress will be a thing of the past. Besides, paper money is dirty and can transmit COVID-19. Most importantly, we can now implement full financial inclusion. In this sense, a new global monetary system and order will break down the socioeconomic and cultural barriers between humans everywhere, as we come together in peace and harmony, one world together. The final phase. While it's impossible to know the future and predict exactly what's going to unfold in the next days, weeks, and months, here is the basic timeline I think we can expect. Unrest will continue to be fomented and to grow. Whether this is via staged events, organic catastrophe and tragedy, or a combination of both matters little. The narrative will continue, and the puppeteers, globalists, bankers, big pharma, military elite, intelligence agencies, whomever exactly they may be, will exploit and inflame all opportunities to the absolute fullest extent necessary to the achievement of their desired ends. People will begin to be killed on both socio-political sides. This will, of course, be pointed to as a justification for increasingly totalitarian measures, permanent or indefinite curfews, strict identification requirements, surveillance and control of movement, disarmament of citizenry. Once the dust is settled and a new martial order is restored through tyrannical force, many will be relieved. Happy for a respite from the rioting and economic devastation, the new monetary, medical, and social order will be accepted gladly, and military presence will no longer be necessary thanks to contact tracing technology and self-policing. The news will switch to coverage of vaccination and medical identification to prove COVID immunity. Social media and the internet will be heavily surveilled and monitored. Dissenting free speech will be viewed as criminally prosecutable hate or terror speech. The COVID-19 narrative will have resurfaced again to sell policy, melded now with the crowd control anti-terror narrative as well. People not even minding this irrational blending because of the concept of the invisible enemy. A positive spin will be given to the new global order, where now all are supposedly equal under the law, except those few above it making policy. COVID will be a thing of the past, and any who wishes to refuse the vaccines, privacy invasions, and socio-economic regulations imposed on them will be viewed as terrorists to be exiled from society with no privileges. State digital currency will be all there is, and privacy as we know it will be almost completely annihilated. Private possession of cryptocurrencies such as Bitcoin will be illegal. The choice will be comply or starve. International military conflict as we know it will end. If you oppose the new order, you will be opposing world peace. The silver lining? It is true that we're all in this together. Not in the way the WHO, Lady Gaga, Bill Gates, or any other tool of the immoral globalist crime syndicate will tell you. As Rio tells the Catholic priest in Albert Camus' classic novel The Plague, especially relevant in the current zeitgeist, quote, "What does it matter? What I hate is death and evil, as you know, and whether you accept this or not, we are together in enduring them and fighting against them. Even God himself cannot separate us now." End quote. This is to say that no matter what political side you're on, no matter what cultural background or melanin content your skin may have, no matter your views on social distancing and mandatory vaccination, the reality of the grand theatrical and brutal COVID-19 psyop will befall us all. What matters is how one responds, addresses, and proactively deals with it. The god of your political party will not save you. It will sacrifice you for its own narrative and purposes in the end. No great man leader from the LP, Repubs, or Dems actually cares about your life in any meaningful way. Your pet views on God and religion do not matter. When tyranny meets you in the street, there will be two choices: go along with it or resist, evade, and fight it. I think it is of critical importance to remember that the state functions by dividing us. Tupac perhaps put it best. Quote, "Recollect your thoughts. Don't get caught up in the mix, because the media is full of dirty tricks." End quote. And it always has been. As Phase 3 approaches, may agorism and resistance thrive, rage fiercely for peace, love, logic, and freedom, all these the same thing in essence, and prevail. An idea cannot be destroyed. End article.